big tech companies, many with a big presence here in Massachusetts, have been slashing jobs left and right as the year comes to a close. We've seen 20,000 cuts in the last week alone from Twitter, Facebook parent Meta, and Lyft. And now reports indicate Amazon will be cutting another 10,000 jobs as early as this week. And if that has you worried about your stock portfolio and thinking about moving into alternative markets, tread carefully, because we also just saw the collapse of cryptocurrency exchange FTX, which was hawked by the likes of Tom Brady, Steph Curry, and Shaq, among others, and which is now filed for bankruptcy and is under federal investigation. So what does this all mean for you and me and the economy beyond these workplaces? I'm joined by Michelle Singletary, personal finance columnist for the Washington Post. Dan Primack is the business editor at Axios. Dan, Michelle, great to see you both.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Dan, starting with you, when you see thousands of layoffs at these places, what's your takeaway? Just high-profile headlines or a broader, deeper kind of problem?
Broader, deeper problem, but for the tech industry specifically, which really, I guess, arguably overhired. You know, if you look at the last couple of years, really even going before the pandemic, tech companies, Amazon, Facebook, et cetera, were hiring at a much greater rate than almost any other sort of company was, and with very, very high paying jobs. So, you know, if you look at the overall economy is adding jobs month over month, but it's tech, which had kind of overhired and is now cutting back, in part because there's a slowdown in ads, which is hurting companies like Facebook, but also there is expectations of a kind of broader, if not economic, not recession, definitely slowdown in consumer spending, which is something that Amazon's looking at.
Michelle, do you subscribe to the same analysis?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you know, they got bloated, especially during the pandemic. But, you know, people were on Facebook. People were buying things on Amazon because we were all sort of, you know, many of us stuck at home. And so now people are venturing out. They want to get out. They want to go to, you know, brick and mortar stores, actually, and traveling. And so, but I think we have to be really careful not to look at what's happening in the tech industry as an indictment of all the companies and whether, you know, many companies are going to have layoffs. We certainly are having trouble in the economy, but it's not as bad as people think when you look at some of the other numbers. People are still adding jobs. People are still spending, and they're going to be spending for the holiday.
Well, you know, speaking of spending, Michelle, when I had to do a double take. When I read Jeff Bezos saying that people should put off large purchases, I had a feeling I would see him sitting on your lap with your arm up his back, working his mouth. Were you shocked by that comment from Mr. Consumer in America?
Yeah, well, you know, he's my boss, so I'm not going to go there. But
Oh, I forgot about that, actually.
I want to keep this girl's job.
I forgot about that.
So let me just say this. I think it is wise that if you are struggling already, or you're just getting by paycheck to paycheck, that you be very careful right now. We don't know really where the economy is going. We may be in a recession. We may skirt past one, but it is true that there are lots of Americans who are suffering right now. All those tech workers who are out of work. And here's the thing, they are highly paid individuals. And when we had the Great Recession, we knew that it took anywhere from 18 months to 24 months for highly compensated individuals to find similar employment at that same income rate. And so, but they've got mortgages based on those high salaries. They've got kids in private school, or they've been shopping and doing all kinds of things. And that, you know, is a concern for me. So I always tell people, if you're on the margin, particularly at times like this, that you should put to the side large unnecessary purchases or home improvements and things like that until we see how things shake out.
I'll call you after the show and you can tell me what you really think about what goes on there, okay? You know, Dan, can we continue the tutorial just for a second? I've learned in this whole process that obviously when the Fed raises interest rates, consumer spending comes back, business investment goes down. So layoffs, I guess, one would assume are a natural consequence. But the flip side is when it's so hard for companies to find employees, I would say that if you're that big and that wealthy, you hesitate to lay off people in those kinds of numbers, because when you need them back, you're going to have a hell of a time finding them. What's wrong with my analysis?
I think the only thing that's wrong, as Michelle said, these are generally very high-paying jobs. And for sure, you know, Facebook, Google, et cetera, they have struggled over the last couple of years to hire too, not in the same way that your corner coffee shop has struggled. They've struggled because these candidates have their choice of lots of jobs offering huge salaries, so they've had to compete. But because these are very well compensated roles, if they do decide to hire back or regrow, they're offering really, really, really good packages. This isn't somebody deciding between two crappy jobs. These are great jobs, and they will be able to find their people.
You know, a minute ago, Dan, Michelle said she wasn't sure whether a recession's in our future. I'd love you to give your 2 cents, but whether it is or not, it's just a word to most people who are living normal lives. What should it mean to them in a concrete way?
What it means in a concrete way, it does tie into jobs because employers look at that and employers care if America's in a recession. And they obviously look within the numbers and inside what they actually do and what they actually sell. But if employers believe that their business is going to slow, that probably means their hiring is going to slow, or they might lay people off because they want to be able to maintain their margins and they want to stay in business. So that's why you should care. If there's a recession, long term, that probably does bode back poorly for hiring.
You know, Michelle, you wrote that, and I'm paraphrasing, that Musk at Twitter conducted a master class in how not to treat people, the 3,500 people he laid off. Based on your experience, and you deal with real people all the time, does that trickle down to instill fear, not in people who work for Twitter, but people who work in other big companies worrying that that's going to be me next?
Yeah, you know, the thing about it is we know historically that when companies get in trouble, the first thing they look to is layoffs. You know, you don't see mass layoffs, you know, the CEO taking a pay cut oftentimes. And so I do think it shakes people's confidence in their own job. And maybe it's a good wake-up call for some folks to say, if it could happen there, it could happen to me. I think the way he conducted it was horrible, inhumane, no empathy. I mean, you know, people are learning about their livelihood on Twitter from a tweet. Yeah. I mean, I just, you know, I have a master's degree in business. And if I was in class right now taking my courses, we would be outraged. You know, it'd be a case study. We'd all be fussing. You know, you need to be humane with people. If you have to have layoffs, you know, do it in a way that doesn't make people feel that you don't care about them. You should make it seem like this is the last resort. And I'm so, so sorry. I mean, he's got time to tweet. He should have got on that private plane and visited workshops, or at least had a Zoom call to say, hey, listen, I am sorry. Because part of the reason why they're suffering is that he took on all this debt, the richest man in the world, taking on debt, which impacted his workers, regular folks' livelihood. And as you can see, I'm pretty ticked off about that. And I don't even work at Twitter. You know, I mean, I believe that you can do it. I had a person that I had to lay off one time because the company was downsizing and it was just before the holidays. And I said, listen, I'm not gonna let this girl go, the single mother, just before the holidays. Can we keep her on at least till the beginning of the year and give her some time? And they agreed to that. And that's how you do things, right? You care about people, especially when you are so freaking wealthy. I mean, it's just a horrible situation for those folks.
You know, speaking of that particular person, Dan Primack, he urged people to vote Republican, and I guess things didn't go quite as well as he expected. But either already today or by the time we go to bed, there'll be a Republican majority, a slight majority in the House of Representatives. What do you think that will mean for all that we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes?
I don't think it'll mean all that much because you're going to have a Democratic Senate and obviously a Democratic White House, and then you're going to have Republicans running the House. You know, as people kind of in the business community leading into the election said, and they were assuming that Republicans would win both chambers, it will mean a lot more in terms of oversight, a lot more in terms of hearings and maybe even bringing in heads of various regulatory bodies like the CFTC and the SEC. But in terms of actual legislation, which is the thing that often impacts jobs or taxes, et cetera, nobody's expecting a hell of a lot of actual legislation in the next 2 years.
Now, Dan Primack, I know that one of your areas of expertise is in 30-year-old former billionaires. Am I not right about that?
Sounds right.
Okay, so Sam Bankman-Fried, the 30-year-old head of FTX, which essentially collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 11, and it's a cryptocurrency company that many of us heard of when we first saw Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady on television. Can you do like a 60-second, what does this mean for people who are not involved in that market? What's the trickle-down impact, if anything?
if you're not involved in the market, good for you. It probably doesn't mean all that much. And just quickly for those, it's a very complicated story that even those who are investors in FTX don't quite understand yet. Candidly, there's going to be lots of lawsuits and litigation to figure it out. The short story is FTX was an exchange, like a stock exchange. And as an exchange, it should simply be taking a little bit of cut of every trade, and it shouldn't be losing money. That's why it was profitable when people first invested in it. The problem is that Sam Bankman-Fried, the CEO, also had a hedge fund separate, which actually predated FTX. And it appears that when the hedge fund started to struggle, Sam took either user money or other money from FTX. He pushed it into the hedge fund, hoping the hedge fund would succeed, and then he could fill the hole. A little bit of Madoff there. Unfortunately, the hedge fund continued to struggle. The hole got bigger, the hole got bigger, the hole got bigger. And a rival cryptocurrency entrepreneur kind of pushed on it a little bit by saying he was basically going to sell some securities. And while that little push made the whole house of cards fall down. For people in general, I mean, it means one thing for sure. If you're going to invest in cryptocurrencies, do it in a U.S. regulated exchange. Yes, FTX has a U.S. affiliate which went bankrupt, but for those who invested in FTX Global, which is the one based in the Bahamas, they're going to have a hard time ever getting their money back. There are U.S. crypto exchanges. I'm not a crypto investor, but if you're going to do it, at least invest via a regulated one.
I assume he's home commiserating with his 9 roommates. Michelle, you're going to have the final 30 seconds just to expand on what you touched on at the top of the interview. For the concerned individual who's worried this is going to happen to him, he's going to be the layoffee, or she is, how does she or he prepare in ways that will protect them should that happen?
Yeah, I'm going to say something that's a little bit counterintuitive because you know me, I'm very anti-debt. But if you think that you're facing a layoff, what you want to do is pull back on any aggressive debt plans that you've had because you're going to need to stockpile cash. And so you want to make sure, you want to make sure that you have money aside to carry you through the months where you might not have any income.
Fair enough. Michelle Singletary, Dan Primack, as always, learned a lot. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.